Hey, let's take this boring HTML and transform it using Flex for the navigation bar, and then also Grid in order to construct a 3-column web page and also update the footer and header so that looks more like a real modern website instead of just plain old boring HTML. So this is the end product where we've got the company logo on the top taking the full width, the footer on the bottom taking the full width, the sidebar taking about 15%, the main menu area taking about 60%, and then the other sidebar where we've got the advertising on the right-hand side taking about 15%. We created the navigation menu using Flex, and that's what we use for the nav bar. So go ahead and update the HTML code, apply styling to it using the Flex box as well as the grid layout in order to construct and update the HTML to display like this. And also it is responsive. So use the media queries in order to make your web page responsive and make adjustments to the navigation menu as well as the grid as needed when it resizes. And also I did use Google fonts. If you want to use the same Google font that I used, that's going to be Rubik, and that's the font that was used for the page content. Pause the video here, try it out, and I'll walk you through the solution coming up. So opening up the editor, we've essentially got the header, nav, and everything is wrapped within a main class called wrapper, and all of these elements are sitting right on the root of wrapper. And now we're ready to start applying our content. So first, open up the styling. We've already got it linked to the style sheet. Specify the box sizing and border box, again, so we have no surprises on the content. We're also going to add in a font family from the Google fonts. So let's do that right off the bat. Let's also select a font from Google to bring into our web content. And I'll select this one here, the Rubik, and selecting this as the font file, embed the import code so we can do it right within our style sheet and place it right at the top there so we can bring that content in, and then use the font family for body of the font that we've just selected. So within the body tags, go specify that as the font family, and I'll do a quick refresh. So that gives us use of that Google font. Let's create our navigation bar next. So that's located back in the CSS where we've got a class of main nav. So make a selection of the main nav element, and it's got unordered list and list items contained within it. And for the unordered list, this is where we're going to apply the display flex. So display flex. So the easiest way to make a navigation bar is using Flex. So that's the one that we're going to be using. Let's get rid of the list style, set that to none. So we get rid of the bullet points. Also any of the existing margins and existing padding. Let's set that to 0 so we don't have any of that existing. Also update the background color. And I'm going to just set it as a black background color. Set the font as white, so we see any of the content and any of the text that's contained within it. Do a quick refresh. So there's our navigation bar. We can't see the navigation items, so we haven't set the properties for that yet. So let's go down and make some space. So again, selecting the main nav and any list items that are contained within there. And actually, we're just going to do any anchor tags that are contained within the main nav. So you can also be more specific on ordered list items, but you don't have to be. So let's select the display them as block. Do a text align, so center the text. Setting up the font size. So it's slightly larger than the typical font. I'm also going to remove the text decoration. Set that to none. Let's see what that looks like. So refresh. We also need to set the color so that we can see the text. And I always like to add a little bit of padding around it to make it more like a button type feel. So do padding top and bottom of 5 pixels and left and right of 10 pixels. And then let's apply the pseudo class for hover. Selecting the hover. And whenever it gets hovered, update the background color. And I'll set the background color to be CCC. So we'll use a grayscale for the background color. So whenever we hover over them, we've got the effect for the navigation bar. And I'm also going to set the media query for the navigation bar as well, so that whenever anybody resizes it and set that at a max width of 600 pix, so just on the small screens, we're going to resize and adjust the way that the unordered list and update their direction. So update the flex direction to be column. So let's refresh and inspect and make sure that that's working. So that resizes the navigation bar and stacks it. Now let's look at the content and update the content accordingly. And we're going to be using grid in order to make updates to the content. So for the element with the header, so this is the main head section. So select the class main head, and we'll give it a grid area value. So this will just be the header, and then apply some other background properties. Okay, so I'll set this to be blue, and we'll have some padding. So quite a bit of padding because this is a header, and font size to 3EM, so fairly large font. Again, because it's header, and text align center. So see what that looks like within the main head area. So there's our company logo, there's our navigation bar, and we can also set the footer content as well. So going down to the footer content, let's grab main footer. And I'm actually going to do this the same because we've already gone over quite a bit of this stuff. Actually, I can't do that because I've got the grid area of header. So let's apply that separately. So the footer, give it a grid area of footer so that we can identify it when we're using the grid to construct the way this is going to look. And I'll give it a background of red, text center, and the rest of it can stay the same. So there's our footer, there's our header. Now we've got our main content area. So let's select the content area that we want to use. We've got the class of content, class of ads, and class of side. So make a selection of them. So class of content, so our main content area. We've got another one with a class of ads, and then a last one with a class of side. And usually when you are constructing your HTML and CSS, that you follow the structure that is laid out. So you do header, navigation, then the next element, next element, and then finally the footer. So now we've got the content area, and we can give it a grid name of content. The ads can have a grid area name of ads, and the side can have a grid area name of side. And then you can apply additional properties as needed to them. So lastly, let's select the element wrapper class, and that's right up here at the top. And so this is the one that's going to be wrapped around all of the elements, and this is where we're going to add our display view for the grid. So display grid. And then using the grid template areas, we can specify the areas for the template. So we do have for header, and then whatever we want for the next, and then we've got footer, and to close that off. So let's go for a 4-column type design. And we've got the content here in the middle, and then we've got ads on the left side. We're going to have the side menu, so we just call that side. Then we've got content, and then our ads. So let's see what this looks like. So refresh, And there we've got our content structured, and of course we can move it around as needed. And the one thing I did forget is the navigation area, so I didn't give that one a name. So for main nav, we need to assign a name for that so that we can position it on our page. And the same thing that we did before, where we were specifying the grid area. We can specify this to be nav. And then just below the header, this is where we can have our nav content. So let's another refresh. So we can move the nav around as needed. And as well, because we've got all the elements selected, we can specify the varying widths that we want to apply to them. And as the screen adjusts with the media query, we can adjust the way the wrapper behaves. So specifying the nav, specifying the content, the ads, and then the footer. So we can go to a one column type design. So now it stacks as one column. If we want to move the side area below the main, we can do that as well. So that's really easy adjustments. So wherever we want it to land and wherever we want to be displayed, we can make the adjustments within the grid template on the media query on the resize of the page. So let's update some of these and give them background colors. And we'll give that one a background color of purple, and then the side can have a background color of pink so that we can distinguish them. So just looking at our example, it resizes nightly, but these still don't look quite right. So let's make one update where we're going to add in and update the grid template columns. So this way we can space out the way that we want the columns to behave. So how much space we want between the columns. Notice that we do have the 4 column template grid areas below. So let's set that accordingly. Well, we can do 25%, 30%, 30%, and or 15%, 15, and 30. So that's not going to equal 40. So let's update these to 35 and 35 and refresh. So that's going to give us more space on the sides. And then in addition, we need to update this when we resize, because if I was to resize this, it looks ugly. It starts getting ugly. So let's also take care of that on the media query and add in that statement and set this to just auto. So that will fill the entire space. When we resize, now it's auto sizing. Also, you might want to set some minimum heights for these elements. And this is optional, except when they do resize to the small screen, then they pretty much disappear. They're only going to be sized according to the content that's available. So you can set heights and sizes for these in the elements themselves. And also keep in mind that we are using the grid, and we've already set some of the default column widths for these elements already with the column grid. And also I'm going to add in a gap for the wrapper so that we do have a grid gap. So there is some spacing between the grid items. How about we set it to 20 pixels and see what that looks like. Oh, there's a little bit too much. Let's set that to 5 pixels and refresh. So that gives us some spacing between the different elements. And we're also going to set a minimum height of 200 pixels, and we'll do the same for the side menu as well. So that will always make sure that it's at least 200 pixels. Can center the content as well. So text align center for the side. And that's it. So we are ready and we've completed the website. Always test it out within the browser to make sure that everything works as intended. It does resize properly, and make the adjustments accordingly if some of the font might be too big or if there's some of the spacing for the various elements might be too large. You can adjust it within the media query. And again, even if your colors are slightly off or some of the spacing is slightly off, the main thing here is the main objective was to make sure that you are able to use the flex in order to design the menu, and then also the grid in order to design the web page.